Picture this. Constantinople, May 1453. You're Lucas, notaris, Grand Lokothit of the Byzantine Empire. The empire's chief financial minister. You're standing in the imperial treasury, and the numbers in front of you are a death sentence, 7,000 gold hyperpyra. That's the entire liquid wealth of what was once Rome. The Genoese ambassador is demanding 200,000 hyperpyra for naval support. Your empire's entire treasury wouldn't fund 2 weeks of adequate defense against Mehmed's siege cannons. Outside, Ottoman artillery pounds the Theodosian walls that have protected this city for 1,000 years. Inside, you're counting coins that won't buy salvation. Here's what keeps me up at night about that scene. Lucas Notaris wasn't looking at a military defeat. He was staring at the final page of a financial autopsy that had been written over 200 years. The Byzantine Empire didn't fall to Turkish cannons. It died from a debt spiral so methodical, so predictable, that every stage was documented by the very people who caused it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how the world's most durable empire engineered its own financial extinction. Not through war, not through plague, but through a debt mechanism so precise that the forensic record reads like a corporate bankruptcy manual. The forensic record shows the Byzantine death followed 4 distinct stages, each one documented by contemporary sources and repeated by every empire that followed the same pattern. Number 1. Currency debasement masquerading as monetary policy. In 1252, the Byzantine gold solidus contained 4-5 grams of pure gold. By 1453, the hyperpyrin contained 0.45 grams. That's a 90% debasement over exactly 201 years. Here's what blows people's minds about that number. It wasn't random inflation. It was systematic wealth extraction documented in the imperial mint records. Constantinople's master of the mint, John Kantakouzenos, recorded the precise debasement schedule in his treasury protocols, preserved in the Vatican secret archives. Each reduction was justified as temporary war financing. The Fourth Crusade debt from 1204, the Anatolian reconquest campaigns, the Serbian territorial disputes. Every military expenditure required emergency currency dilution that became permanent policy. Same pattern, different continent. The Roman denarius in 64 AD contained 9 grams of silver under Nero. By 268 AD enter Gallienus, it contained 0.2 grams, 0.2 grams. A 5% debasement over 204 years. The mechanism was identical. Military financing through currency destruction. The outcome was identical. Imperial collapse preceded by complete monetary breakdown. But here's the kicker about the Byzantine case. They have the Roman precedent. They knew exactly what currency debasement did to Rome. Imperial librarian Michael Critoboulos wrote in 1440 that the palace library contained 47 complete manuscripts on Roman monetary policy, including Cassius Dio's detailed account of the denarius collapse. They weren't ignorant. They were desperate. Number 2. Sovereign borrowing that transferred effective control to creditor states. By 1300, the Byzantine Empire owed Venetian and Genoese banks a combined 2-3 million gold pieces. The entire empire's annual tax revenue was 800,000 pieces. They owed their creditors 2 to 9 years of total imperial income. But here's the forensic detail that changes everything. The debt wasn't just financial. It was territorial. The Golden Bull of 1082, signed by Emperor Alexios I, granted Venice complete customs exemption throughout the Byzantine Empire. Venice collected Byzantine customs revenue directly. The empire's own merchants paid 10% tariffs to the imperial treasury, while Venetian merchants paid 0. By 1200, Venice was collecting more customs revenue from Byzantine trade than the Byzantine government itself. The documented numbers are surgical. In 1354, Byzantine customs revenue from Constantinople's port, 87,000 hyperpyra. Venetian collected customs from the same port, 134,000 hyperpyra. The creditor state was extracting more wealth from Byzantine territory than the actual government, not through military occupation, through debt contract enforcement. Same mechanism in 16th century Spain. By 1557, Philip II owed Genoese bankers 7 million ducats. Spain's annual silver income from the Americas, 5 million ducats. The Genoese didn't conquer Spanish territory. They didn't need to. Spanish silver flowed directly from Seville to Genoa through debt service before the Spanish crown could spend a single coin on domestic policy. The French Third Republic followed the identical pattern. By 1870, France owed Rothschild banks 2.4 billion francs. Annual French tax revenue, 1.8 billion francs. The Franco-Prussian War wasn't won by Prussian military superiority. It was won by French financial exhaustion. Bismarck didn't destroy French military capacity. French creditors had already done that through debt service requirements that prevented military modernization. Number 3. Trade route dependency that became economic hostage-taking. By 1400, 73% of Byzantine imperial revenue came from customs duties on trade passing through Constantinople. The empire had become a toll booth. When Venetian and Genoese merchants controlled the Mediterranean trade routes, they controlled Byzantine survival. The 1439 Treaty of Florence, negotiated by Emperor John VIII, reveals the complete dependency. Byzantium would provide naval facilities and port access. Venice and Genoa would provide 40 warships and 8,000 soldiers for Ottoman defense. But Clause 17 of the treaty, preserved in the Doge's palace archives, specified that Italian naval support would end immediately if Byzantium defaulted on any existing debt payments. Military alliance contingent on debt service. Not strategy. Extortion. Here's the documented sequence that killed the empire. April 1453. Ottoman siege begins. Byzantine treasury. 7,000 hyperpyra. Required payment to Genoese banks. 23,000 hyperpyra due within 60 days. Genoa's response to Byzantine default. Immediate withdrawal of all naval support. May 29, 1453, Constantinople falls. Not to superior Ottoman military technology. To the absence of Genoese ships that could have broken the Ottoman naval blockade. Same pattern destroyed the Dutch East India Company. By 1780, the VOC owed Dutch banks 134 million guilders. Annual company revenue, 89 million guilders. When the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War disrupted trade routes, creditors demanded immediate repayment. The company couldn't service existing debt while financing military operations. Result: dissolution in 1799 of what had been the world's first multinational corporation. Debt service requirements, not British naval power, killed the most profitable company in human history. The British East India Company repeated the same sequence. By 1858, company debt to the British government, £40 million. Annual company revenue from India, £22 million. The Indian Rebellion wasn't suppressed by company forces. It was suppressed by British Crown forces after the company proved financially incapable of imperial defense. The Crown dissolved the company not for military failure, but for debt-to-income ratios that made continued operation mathematically impossible. Number 4. The final stage. Selling sovereign rights to service debt. This is where the Byzantine collapse becomes a perfect template for modern analysis. Between 1435 and 1453, the empire sold or mortgaged every remaining sovereign prerogative to service creditor demands. 1435. Mining rights to Genoese banks. All silver extraction from remaining imperial territory flowed directly to creditors. 1441. Port management rights to Venice. Venetian administrators controlled customs collection from all remaining Byzantine ports. 1448. Currency minting rights. The imperial mint operated under Genoese supervision. New hyperpyra required creditor approval before circulation. 1452. Military recruitment rights. The empire couldn't conscript soldiers without creditor permission, as military spending competed with debt service. By May 1453, Emperor Constantine XI was emperor in name only. The forensic record shows he controlled no imperial revenue, commanded no imperial military, and managed no imperial territory without creditor approval. He died defending a city he didn't financially own. If you're realizing that everything you thought you knew about imperial collapse is wrong, hit that subscribe button. This channel is Financial Forensics. We dissect the decisions that destroyed empires, bankrupted nations, and killed corporations. I reverse engineer the specific mechanisms that turn world powers into debt slaves. It's free. Same pattern, same stages, same outcome. The Ottoman Empire, 1876, debt-to-revenue ratio of 3:1. One led to European creditor supervision through the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. sovereign bankruptcy disguised as international assistance. China, 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki required 200 million taels of silver in reparations to Japan. China's entire annual revenue, 89 million taels. Chinese customs revenue placed under foreign administration for debt service. The Qing dynasty survived until 1912, but effective sovereignty ended in 1895 when debt service requirements exceeded domestic spending capacity. Weimar Germany, 1923. Reparations payments of 2 billion gold marks annually. German tax revenue, 6 billion paper marks. The hyperinflation wasn't caused by money printing for domestic spending. It was caused by printing money to purchase foreign currency for debt payments denominated in gold. Currency destruction through external debt service, not internal fiscal irresponsibility. So where are we seeing these signs right now? The forensic pattern from Byzantine collapse applies directly to current sovereign debt dynamics. United States federal debt, $33.7 trillion as of October 2023. Annual federal revenue, $4.9 trillion. Debt-to-revenue ratio, 6.9 to 1. Interest payments alone consume $640 billion annually, 13% of total federal revenue. The Byzantine Empire collapsed at a 2.19:1 debt-to-revenue ratio. Japan's government debt, 1,271 trillion yen. Annual government revenue, 107 trillion yen. Debt-to-revenue ratio, 11.9 to 1. Interest payments consume 23% of government revenue. Japan maintains this ratio only because the Bank of Japan purchases 67% of all government debt issuance. When the central bank becomes the primary creditor, the debt isn't eliminated, it's internalized. But here's the modern twist that makes the Byzantine pattern more dangerous today. Global sovereign debt is increasingly dominated by foreign creditors with their own strategic interests. China holds $859 billion in U.S. Treasury securities as of September 2023. That's not portfolio investment. It's economic leverage through debt dependency. Same mechanism. Updated technology. China's Belt and Road Initiative has extended $123 trillion in infrastructure loans to 149 countries since 2013. Sri Lanka's debt to China, $7.4 billion. Sri Lankan annual government revenue, $4.2 billion. When Sri Lanka defaulted in 2022, China didn't demand military bases. It demanded port management rights, mining concessions, and customs revenue allocation. Sovereign rights transferred through debt collection, not military conquest. Pakistan owes China $27 billion through Belt and Road projects. Pakistani annual tax revenue, $39 billion. Pakistan provides territory and population. China provides infrastructure and debt. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Agreement grants Chinese companies customs exemptions, tax holidays, and resource extraction rights. The exchange ratio favors the creditor by exactly the same mechanism that destroyed Byzantium. The forensic record from 1453 gives you 4 specific protocols for recognizing sovereign debt collapse before it becomes irreversible. Protocol 1. Monitor debt-to-revenue ratios above 3:1. This is the mathematical threshold where debt service competes with essential government functions. Every empire that exceeded this ratio either defaulted or transferred sovereign rights to creditors within 50 years. Protocol 2. Track foreign creditor concentration. When external debt exceeds 40% of total sovereign debt, the debtor nation becomes subject to creditor state policy priorities. Foreign creditors don't just collect interest, they enforce political alignment through debt service requirements. Protocol 3. Identify revenue source dependency. When more than 60% of government revenue depends on a single economic sector, any disruption to that sector creates immediate debt service crises. The Byzantine dependence on trade route customs made the empire vulnerable to Venetian and Genoese economic manipulation. Protocol 4. Recognize sovereign right transfers disguised as economic partnerships. Infrastructure investment, resource extraction agreements, and port management contracts aren't commercial transactions when they involve strategic national assets. They're incremental sovereignty transfers that become irreversible as debt accumulates. Protocol 5. Calculate the gap between debt service requirements and military spending capacity. When debt payments exceed defense spending, the nation can't protect itself from creditor pressure. Military independence requires financial independence. Debt dependency makes military sovereignty impossible. The question isn't whether you've heard of the fall of Constantinople. The question is whether you can read the financial autopsy that killed the Byzantine Empire 18 years before the first Ottoman cannon fired. Lucas Notaras died in his treasury not because he lacked military options, but because he had already sold them to service debt. The Ottomans conquered a city that was bankrupt before they arrived. Subscribe if you want to see the signs before they become obituaries. What other military defeats were actually debt collection operations? Let me know in the comments.